What if the secret to inner peace and better relationships was as simple as three little words? If you've been on social media lately, you've probably heard someone say, just let them. The first time I heard someone say that, I leaned into the video because I was curious as to let them do what. I was waiting to hear, the catch to that. It is a catch three-word mantra that has sparked millions of conversations across social media. But what is the let them theory? Why has it resonated so deeply, and what truth or hype lies behind it? Hi, I'm Isabella, and welcome back to Speaking of This. And if you're new here, welcome to the podcast that takes headlines like this one, flips them over, and explores the other side. On today's episode, we're diving into the viral let them theory, and we're not going to be able to do that without talking about the person who brought this theory to the masses. Mel Robbins. I'll be breaking it all down from the origin of this theory and how she introduced it. We'll talk about why it's struck such a nerve culturally, the emotional undercurrents that have so many people saying, wow, I needed this. I've also got insights from three psychologists, some who see real value in this idea and others who are urging caution. We're going to connect the dots to psychological principles or lack thereof behind this theory. And yes, we're going to wade into some online conversations, the praise, the memes, the critiques, even a bit of controversy. By the end of this episode, you'll be thinking about how you might use or not use the let them theory in your own life. Is it pop culture fluff, or could these three little words carry some real wisdom for how we deal with others? And how can we apply it practically while still keeping healthy boundaries and communications? We have lots to cover, so let's just get into it. It all began as many high school prom nights begin when your teenager drops wisdom and there's an epiphany moment. Okay, yeah, probably not all prom nights begin that way, but for Mel Robbins, this is the origin of her story, of where, at least this part of her story, of where this let them theory started. If you don't know, Mel Robbins is a motivational speaker and an author known for keeping it real. If her name sounds familiar, you might recall her 5-second rule for overcoming hesitation. In 2022, the Mel Robbins podcast, she recounted a really personal story. She was saying she was in full mom mode, trying to control her child's prom night plans, worrying about every detail, typical parenting stuff. It was pouring rain outside and the kids wanted to go to a taco place, but they didn't have reservations. I remember it's prom night. You kind of need reservations. And Mel admitted she started really freaking out. You can't go there. It's raining. There's not enough room. You don't have reservation. It's a terrible idea. She was micromanaging the situation. Maybe you can relate to that if you've ever tried to fix someone's plans for them. Then one of her children turned to her and said, you know what, Mom, if they want to go, let them. It's not your prom, just let them. And in that split second, something clicked for her. Those two words, let them, stopped her in her tracks. She described it like a wave of relief. She realized she was being that controlling mom, and those little phrases were her cue to step back and drop the rope. So she let go of trying to steer the evening, and guess what? The kids went, they had fun, and the world did not end because she stopped controlling it. Now, she first shared this epiphany casually on social media in a very short selfie video. In that quick clip, she introduced what she called the let them theory. And to her surprise, it actually blew up. It went viral because within a week, over 14 million people had watched and shared that video. And she later noted that when something goes viral like that, it struck a nerve. The concept was so simple that people immediately got it and they started retelling it. If your friend didn't invite you to the party, let them. Your partner wants to wear that hideous shirt, Just let them. Someone's gossiping about you at work. Just let them. So it became a sort of fill in the blank formula for any situation where someone else's behavior is bothering you. So, seeing the reaction, she dug deeper into the idea on her podcast and eventually made it the premise of her latest book, The Let Them Theory, a life-changing tool that millions of people can't stop talking about. And it was released in 2024. In her words, when you let them do whatever it is they want to do, it creates more control and an emotional peace for you and a better relationship with the people in your life. So in other words, stop trying to control others and you'll actually feel more in control of your own emotions. Plus, your relationships will improve because you're not constantly battling for your way. The idea clearly tapped into something universal. I mean, controlling others or just wishing others would behave the way we want is practically a human hobby. We've all been there. Mel herself confessed that she had a controlling streak, whether it was about prom night or telling her husband to load the dishwasher. Okay, maybe the last one was me, but I might be projecting a little bit. Point is, the struggle to let people be who they are is real, and she offered a mantra to help break that cycle. That said, and we can understand why people would latch on to that, but why did this little phrase explode into a powerful movement? But before I can answer this question, I need to settle something controversial about this theory. Where did it actually originate from? It turns out that viral mantra, let them, actually began as a poem by poet Cassie Phillips, and she first shared it publicly in 2022. She titled it Just Let Them. So her poem is a powerful, heartfelt piece about learning to let go of people's choices and find peace and acceptance. In those times that she released it, she was addressing to anyone who was feeling hurt or left behind. And I'm going to quote her actual words from what she said. If they want to choose something or someone over you, let them. If they want to walk out of your life and leave, hold the door open and let them. Phillips' poem quickly gained traction on social media, and it struck a nerve with those who had experienced heartbreak or betrayal. And by late 2022, her words had ignited a viral movement. People were sharing her poem across Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. They were discussing their own experiences of letting go and even getting the phrase "let them" tattooed on their body as a daily reminder. So you can see that it caused a huge movement. And according to Phillips, 2 weeks later, she posted a photo of her own Let Them tattoo. So one of the people that read it got a tattoo. She got a tattoo. She was so happy it was going viral. She said she was truly humbled that her tattoo and her words are everywhere and that people were so grateful and noting how incredible, embracing her words and how life-changing they had been. And she had hoped that her poem would help others remember their worth and reach a liberating moment of self-worth actualization. Fast forward to 2023, and the Let Them theory concept hit the mainstream when motivational speaker Mel Robbins, she discovered it and introduced it to her massive audience. And I already gave you the origin story of how that came to be. Now, listen, I told you already that it had its viral moment when the poem was released by Cassie, but you have to understand there's a difference in audience. Mel has a massive audience. So she was able to repackage this poetic mantra into a straightforward self-help strategy for setting boundaries. These simple words were reminding people to let others be and to focus on their own peace. But she had such a huge audience that it just gained a mass traction. And I'm aware that there are those that feel that Mel never gave credit to the original author of the poem. And I'm not here to dispute that one way or the other because I simply do not know the answer to that. But I do know that the poem that Cassie wrote was released before Mel brought it to her massive audience. And getting back to more of what I do know, why this little phrase exploded into a movement. Part of the answer is simplicity. The theory is really straightforward. Anyone can grasp it in seconds. And let's take a look at what some psychologists think about this theory. And there are more than a few that agree with these next points we're about to discuss. And let's break down why this phrase exploded into a movement. Part of the answer is simplicity. The theory is so straightforward, anyone can grasp it in seconds. Another reason it resonated is because everyone can relate to the scenarios. Think about the examples that are flooding social media. Your friends go on a trip and they don't invite you, let them. Your ex moves on with someone new, let them. Someone leaves a rude comment, let them. Each of these situations trigger feelings of rejection, control, insecurity, FOMO, you name it. We've all felt the urge to intervene, to argue, to overreact, to cling tighter. Well, when you tap into this theory and you tap into these everyday emotional dramas, you're offering just a really two-word release valve. It's almost like an incantation you say to yourself to prevent a spiral of overthinking or blowing up over something. Culturally, the timing could not have been more perfect because by the mid-2020s, people were burnt out on conflict, drama, and a lot of other stuff going on. And so this let them theory tapped into our powerful desire for mental peace, encouraging us to focus on our own well-being and happiness. It's empowering in a quiet way as well. It's giving us permission to not take on the mental load of others' actions. Instead of constant vigilance over what everyone else is doing, we're reclaiming our energy. Plus, let's be honest. It makes for great social media content. It's memeable. People started sharing their own let them anecdotes and even parody videos. On so many different places, you'd see skits like my kid wants to wear pajamas to the grocery store, let them. It became a trend to just kind of, make these videos, riff on it. Some of those were sincere, some were humorous. And the phrase is just so simple. You could plug and play it anywhere that it turned into an internet catchphrase. It even caught the attention of major influencers. There were influencers everywhere spreading it. Everyday people were posting it. They were posting how they applied it in their marriage or at work. And don't forget, there were people literally getting the words let them tattooed on their bodies. Yes, apparently some people were continuing to do that. So it's a full-fledged phenomena. Beyond the hype, there's a deep emotional undercurrent here. Control versus acceptance. Let them hit a cultural moment when many people realized, you know what? I'm exhausted trying to make others fit my expectations. Mel Robbins, who brought it to the masses, she herself said every single one of us struggles with either controlling behavior or controlling thoughts. We overthink why someone did this or didn't do that. We ruminate on how to change people's minds, or we get anxious when things don't go the way that they should. So this theory offers instant relief. It tells you to let go, and letting go is liberating. And as Mel Robbins herself put it, it is so liberating when you drop the sword, you just let go. So those who tried this, right, they plug and played it in whatever space in their life that it fit, they would come back and they would post everywhere across social media that they felt such a feeling, a wave of peace when they managed to sincerely say, okay, let them, about something that used to drive them crazy. Now, I had a listener message me describing her own experience with this. Now, her coworkers were gossiping about her, and normally she'd confront it or she'd just stress about it or ruminate about it endlessly. What she did instead is she whispered to herself, let them, and then she went on about her day. Now, that story that I just shared with you reminds me of an article I read when I was doing my research on this topic, and it was from a clinical psychologist, and her name was Mary Goslett. She said that if she hears someone gossiping about her, in the past, she would have an over the top reaction, or she would just step back and just try to shield herself from it. Now, what she does is she says, let them have their gossip. She doesn't rush to defend herself or set anyone straight about anything. It's about giving yourself a breather rather than diving into conflict headfirst, fueled by hurt, fueled by distress. When she said that when people tried this, many found it empowering, like they regained control not over the gossipers, but over their own emotional state. So what exactly is going on here? What is it and what isn't it? I've given you a few examples of people's experience. So let's just clearly define this theory. But I want to do it from the perspective of how it's really running viral out there. And in order to do that, I need to define it in Mel Robbins' own terms. So the core idea is this. If someone is doing something, especially something that affects you or that you might normally try to control, let them do it. Don't try to stop them. Don't try to convince them. Don't try to coerce them otherwise. Just allow it to happen and manage your reaction instead of their behavior. By doing this, you're going to save yourself a lot of emotional angst, and often you'll preserve or even improve the relationship with this person because you're not trying to force the other person to be something or someone that they're simply not. Now, she also emphasizes that let them is about focusing on what you can control, which is just yourself. Other people's choices, feelings, and opinions are simply theirs. We might not like them, but we often can't change them, at least not by force. So instead of getting upset, you just step back. It's a form of acceptance. And so Mel describes it as allowing others to just be who they are, and in doing so, freeing yourself. There is a poignant line from her that I'd like to quote that she said, "When you let somebody just be who they actually are and you stop trying to make them something else, you realize in so many relationships you actually are in love with their potential." Okay, that's powerful. How often are we in love with an idealized version of someone and constantly disappointed by the real them? So the let them theory is saying, see the reality, accept it, and respond from there. But I need to make an important clarification because let them does not mean condone them or agree with them. This is where a lot of confusion and critique happens. So let's break it down. The let them theory is all about acceptance, which is not the same as forgiveness or approval. You can let someone do a thing without liking it or approving of it. For example, maybe your friend always shows up late. You can let them, meaning you accept that this is who they are, a late person. That doesn't mean you think it's great to be late or that you won't adjust your own approach. Maybe you tell them an earlier start time next time so they won't be late. Or you decide, you know what, I'm not going to get upset about waiting because that's who they are. You're simply acknowledging reality. They're always late. You stop trying to change that trait by nagging or getting upset about it. You might still decide on consequences or boundaries like I'll start the movie without you, etc. And this brings me to a key point. You can let them and still maintain boundaries or make decisions for yourself. The theory does not require you to tolerate harmful behavior indefinitely or stay in unhealthy situations. It's not saying let them walk all over you. A worry many people voiced in a lot of online discussions about this particular theory. In fact, let them can go hand in hand with deciding, and I'll let myself walk away. Now, there was an article in Psychology Today, And I want to talk about what it actually said about this theory. And it put it really well. The let them theory encourages detachment and setting boundaries when necessary. You can let them and still decide to distance yourself or establish firmer boundaries with that person. In other words, accept what they're doing and then choose your response. Sometimes that response is to simply not respond at all, no emotional reaction, no attempt to control. Other times it might mean calmly removing yourself from the sphere of their influence. But even if you have to leave or enforce boundaries, you're doing it without the internal battle of why won't they change? So you've just accepted that they are who they are. But that acceptance doesn't mean they have to be in your space. So let them means don't waste energy trying to fix or control other people. It doesn't mean you agree with them, forgive them, or that you must continue to engage with them. It just means you acknowledge reality. This is who they are and focus on what you can do. What do I need for myself given that reality? Before we move on, I want to mention when the let them theory does not apply, because it doesn't apply in every situation. And I will say that even Mel Robbins herself has caveats. Common sense plays a role. Mel has noted, for instance, if someone is truly doing something that violates your core boundaries or is harmful, you're not just going to ignore it. So there's a difference between controlling trivial stuff like your partner's outfit or a friend's restaurant pick versus responding to serious mistreatment. And I think this is so important because this is often overlooked in a lot of those conversations about this theory. If you're in a toxic or abusive situation, letting them is not a magic fix. You need to seek help and think about ways to remove yourself from a harmful situation. In fact, in that article that I referenced earlier, they actually posed the question, in a toxic relationship, do you let them or do you hear them? Meaning address the issues. The consensus among professionals is let them is not a one-size-fits-all situation or solution. It's a mindset tool primarily for situations where your attempt to control is only causing you distress and it isn't actually changing the other person. So you need to use your own judgment. For big things, you might need a different approach, communication, therapy, or just simply exit the situation. For a lot of those everyday annoyances and personal differences, that's where this theory can have a place. Part of our discussion later on will be about knowing when to use it and when to use something different. Whenever a self-help idea goes viral, mental health professionals have opinions, and lots of them. Whenever a self-help idea goes viral, mental health professionals have opinions. And I promised you at the beginning of this episode insight from 3 psychologists in particular. So let's just get into it. There were 3 psychologists that were interviewed specifically about the let them theory. It's like they knew we needed an expert panel on this, and that is why I have included them. Let's just start with a clinical psychologist, Jacqueline Bolsch. Now, Bolsch is generally supportive of the usefulness of let them. She is intrigued that so many people, millions, let's just say millions, are drawn to it because that lets her know it's addressing a common need among millions of people, including her clients. She noted that concepts don't have to be complex to work. We talked about that earlier. Pushing back against an elitism in psychology where simple equals dismissed. In her view, the theory encourages self-reflection. And she explained it like this. It's about recognizing where you're trying to control others to fit your values, your agenda, or what you need from them. Once you realize that, you can pause and ask yourself, could I let this go? And that little question is so powerful. It creates a mindful moment to decide, is this battle worth fighting or can I just not? So she suggests that often we'll find we can just let it go and that we will feel freed by doing so. So, in her eyes, let them is a handy, memorable tool to check your own controlling impulses and perhaps save a relationship or two by not nitpicking every little thing. Now, let's hear from another clinical psychologist, Dr. Sarah Quinn. Now, Dr. Quinn acknowledges the appeal of the theory, but provides more of a balanced take. She did agree that it's easy to remember and quite practical, which is exactly what people gravitate towards. When someone is in the heat of the moment and they're struggling, they can simply recall, let them. It's a mantra, and it helps them practice letting go. So she sees value in its accessibility. However, Dr. Quinn also labels let them as a pop theory that isn't formally validated, meaning it didn't come out of a peer-reviewed study or anything like that. It's more of a repackaging of an existing idea, which was from that poem. In fact, she explains that Robbins' mantra has adapted a lot of existing evidence-based frameworks. So she's taking it beyond that poem. And we'll talk about those frameworks in a moment. So she cautions us by saying this: the theory is very individualistic focused. So emphasizing your piece, your reaction. And that might unintentionally discourage people from healthy conflict resolution at times that they need to have that resolution. She says that healthy relationships and good well-being can't just be prompted through mindset changes. It's not a precursor to all the complexities of human relationships, okay? In other words, telling yourself let them can help you personally cope, but it might not resolve any deeper issues between you and someone else. Because some conflicts will require communication, negotiation, or even intervention. If your spouse does something that truly hurts you, you don't want to silently seethe forever under the banner of letting them. Eventually, an honest conversation is needed. Her point is well taken. Don't use let them as a band-aid on every problem, because it should be used as a tool, not a total relationship philosophy. Let's hear from another clinical psychologist. Dr. Mary Goslett, another clinical psychologist. She brings a culturally nuanced and therapeutic perspective. She said that the theory can indeed help people be less reactive, and that's great. She gave that example about gossiping that I mentioned earlier. That was from her. Instead of reaching in an over-the-top way, you let them gossip and you don't get entangled in defending yourself. She actually uses it, and she highlighted that it's basically taking a breath before reacting. And this aligns with psychological practices of distress tolerance, not acting impulsively on hurt feelings. However, she also offered up two insightful critiques. First, she said, the let them theory is individualistic, just like what we heard before, and it may not fit all cultural contexts. The motto, it's all about me and my peace, might clash with values if you're talking about those specific cultures, because it's actually all about us. This doesn't mean that the theory is invalid in those contexts per se, but it might need some tweaking. Maybe let them in some cases, but also don't abandon your duty to respectfully address things in a relationship or community when needed. Now, her second point is about human nature. And this one's kind of interesting because we might misuse let them to avoid discomfort. Where the theory can be misused is in the deep hunger for avoiding our own pain, which a lot of people do. And that's a pretty profound one. It's suggesting some people might say, fine, let them, whatever. not from a place of calm acceptance, but from a place of giving up or emotional avoidance. We all know it's tempting to avoid conflict and pain, but some pains in life need to be faced to be able to grow. Pain can be a place of deep growth. And she reminds us of this. So if you find yourself using let them as a constant escape hatch to never have a hard conversation or never confront a fear, you might be short circuiting your own growth, because the idea here is to use this wisely, to let go of unnecessary battles and maybe control tendencies, but not to avoid every uncomfortable growth inducing challenge. I think we can sum up the take from these psychologists. They generally see the value in the mental peace and reduced reactivity that the let them theory can bring. It aligns with a lot of therapeutic principles, which we'll get into a few in a second. But they caution not to oversimplify life's problems. It's not a cure-all. Don't let the theory stop you from communicating in your relationships or standing up for yourself when needed. And be mindful of why you're letting go. Is it healthy acceptance, or are you just sweeping something under the rug? And now I think it's appropriate to bring up one of the arguments against this theory in terms of who is bringing the theory to the masses, which is Mel Robbins. She is not a psychologist. She's actually a lawyer by training. So it's fair to ask, is there any psychological science behind this let them theory, or is it just a catchy slogan? We have actually discussed some of how it is related to psychological principles. And it turns out there is a lot of science that resonates with this idea, even if it's not packaged in those exact words. Now, if you remember, Dr. Quinn said it draws on existing evidence-based frameworks. Let's just quickly go through a few psychological concepts and principles that underlie this theory. Turns out there is a lot of science that resonates with this idea, even if it's not packaged in those exact words. And remember, Dr. Quinn said it draws on existing evidence-based frameworks. Well, there are some psychological concepts, principles, treatments that do underlie the let them theory. And I'm not going to go in detail, but I will just briefly mention a few. We have radical acceptance from DBT therapy, which is dialectic behavior therapy. That is a well-established therapeutic approach, and it has a skill called radical acceptance. We also have acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT for short. That is a modern therapy which basically says accept what's out of your control and commit to action on the things you can control, mainly your own value-driven actions. So have attachment theory, or secure attachment and autonomy. Dr. Quinn also linked the let them concept to this attachment theory, because secure attachment is the healthiest kind of attachment in relationships, and it involves a balance, being connected but not controlling. Lastly, there are some cognitive behavioral concepts here. While not explicitly mentioned in our sources or from our clinical psychologists, it is worth noting that basic cognitive behavioral principles are at play. You simply cannot control others, only your own reaction. This is CBT 101 in stress management. From a neuroscience perspective, I can't resist, because you know that is my background after all. When we practice acceptance, we actually calm our limbic system, so our emotional brain. Studies have shown that mindfulness and acceptance strategies can reduce your amygdala activation. Now, your amygdala is your brain's alarm system, and it alarms with threats and stress. If you perceive someone's action as some sort of dire threat to your plans or your ego, your brain is firing up stress responses. But if you tell yourself, it's okay, I'm going to let them do their thing, it's not an emergency for me, you effectively signal your brain that this is not a life or death situation. And so what's happening is the logical part of your brain gets to step in and soothe the amygdala, the more emotional part of your brain. You're less likely to go into fight or flight mode over someone leaving dishes in the sink or not texting back. And over time, this practice is building emotional resilience. You're training your brain to tolerate uncertainty and disappointment without freaking out about it. And that's huge for your mental health, your physical health, because your body's not going to express all of these neurotransmitters. So, yes, while let them theory itself might not be a scientific term, it certainly aligns well with known psychological practices and in the neuroscience world. And it is shown to improve emotional well being and eventually physical well being. It's like a user friendly wrapper around all of these ideas. No viral theory is without its drama, right? We've mentioned a couple of things surrounded around this theory, but let's talk about the responses out there in that's going on in the social media. We've covered a lot of expert view, but what about the public at large and the various commentators on the internet? Because this has been covered by millions. Many people absolutely adore this theory. It's viral, which is an indication that it struck gold. There were public figures and influencers who hopped on the trend. They were featuring Mel Robbins. They were highlighting the let them theory. It gave it huge credibility, as you can imagine. So that's a big boost. There was a sort of, yes, queen, let them rallying cry in parts of the internet, especially among women who felt this freed them from people pleasing or controlling tendencies. Memes were born. You can see where this is going. Of course, along with praise comes pushback. I remember when this first came out, or when I actually first saw it, and I noticed a comment in one of the comment sections. And the comment said was, the fear that let them might encourage people to be a doormat. And people were asking, so I should just let someone disrespect me, let my partner ignore my needs. And they were basically worried that it sounded like Robbins herself was telling people to swallow their feelings and never speak up. There was also a concern that it could lead to poor communication in relationships. And I mentioned that one of the clinical psychologists actually brought that point up. There was an article I ran across in Harper's Bazaar. Yes, even fashion magazines jumped into this conversation. And they were arguing that constantly avoiding conflict via let them theory might stunt our ability to communicate and resolve issues. So it's emphasizing detachment over engagement. The article pointed out that it doesn't allow for building communication skills or conflict management and just emphasizes detachment. This aligns well with one of our clinical psychologists that I mentioned earlier, Dr. Quinn, who cautioned you can't solve all relationship problems by just changing your mindset internally. Sometimes you need an actual conversation or confrontation. And this is a big one coming up because there was a big critique on Mel Robbins herself and just the whole self-help industry. Some therapists and influencers and other commenters see the let them theory as just another oversimplified slogan in a sea of social media self-help advice. They say that it's not particularly original, as we saw it similar to long-standing concepts, etc., but it's being marketed like a groundbreaking discovery. There is a paradox here that Mel, despite not having a psychological degree, has become social media's favorite armchair psychologist with extremely basic tips. and to some critics, an empire that's been built on obvious and overly generic advice from a woman without a social work or psychology degree looks like another self-help fad or even some sort of gimmick. So they're basically saying, is this really profound or just common sense repackaged for clout? Could it be that there's a bit of professional jealousy or protectiveness, perhaps, from mental professionals? We know that mental professionals in the field, myself included, with my expertise, we've spent years developing nuanced approaches. And then here comes along a motivational speaker, and she reduces all that to a few words, sells a gazillion books, and has millions and millions and millions of people following her. I can understand that skepticism, because sometimes that can be dangerous because certain concepts are oversimplified. And speaking of selling a gazillion books, she did monetize this, the book, podcast episodes, merchandise. I don't know if any Let Them t-shirts still exist, but I'm pretty sure people have those. But that always raises eyebrows. You've got cynics wondering if it's pushed as the next big thing for profit more than for people. However, at last, and you can do your own research, but I don't see that she's ever been in any major scandals, and a lot of her followers genuinely vouch for her authenticity. Still, there are others, authors and journalists, and a lot of, I went down the rabbit hole on this, a lot of people in these different positions, these are professionals, have critiqued her approach in general as akin to some sort of diet culture, always pushing self-improvement without some sort of end. And we're going to go deeper. This is what we do here. We flip these headlines over and we look at what's on the other side. We look at the more complete picture because there's a bit of some spicy drama happening. Plagiarism allegations. Believe it or not, there was a mini controversy where a writer, remember me, I told you, Cassie Phillips, she wrote the poem. She accused Mel of stealing the Let Them idea from her. That viral poem she wrote in 2022, titled Let Them, preached a very similar message of radical acceptance. If you remember at the top of this episode, I actually quoted a few lines from that poem. Now, Cassie is claiming that Mel basically took her concept and capitalized on it. This came out in a Substack interview and on social media where Cassie posted about the alleged plagiarism. Mel denied this. She denied any wrongdoing and said her philosophy draws from many sources. Indeed, she credits various traditions and concepts. Slogans are tricky to trademark or own. Let them as a phrase isn't exactly unique. In the end, that controversy didn't blow up too huge, but it's an example of the kind of conversations that can swirl around a viral phenomenon. Mel didn't invent acceptance, but she gave it a platform and a personal spin that caught fire. I do want to mention some other conversations that this theory has brought about across social media. There were a lot of people concerned. If they were consistently letting people, were they losing self-respect? And that question is valid, but I think what I understand from this theory is that in the case of let them, it might mean accept that they are doing this hurtful thing and will not change. And thus that means you need to probably choose something different. So the online conversations are continuing and they are rich. People are sharing success stories. People are cautioning people against it, not to use it, not to misuse it. And a whole lot of people are simply just sharing the phrase because it's catchy, it's a mantra, and they feel empowered by doing so. And after all this exploration, you might be thinking, this sounds very interesting, maybe helpful, but how do I actually apply it in my life? What situation should I try this? And when should I maybe do something else? And these are all great questions. This is where we bring it down to practical tips and critical reflection for you. First, identify your control triggers in your life. Think about times you get upset because someone isn't doing something the way you want. Classic everyday examples would be your partner or roommate's habits, leaving dishes, what they wear, how they talk to your friends or family decisions. Maybe they didn't invite you somewhere, or they made a choice you disagree with. Your colleagues, someone at work works differently or is slacking, and it's just really upsetting you. Also, those social media scenarios. Someone's posting something that you find offensive, or acquaintances are gossiping. So just write a short list of few things that raises your blood pressure due to other people's actions. And now for each of those items, ask, is this something I can reasonably control or change? In many cases, the honest answer is no. You simply cannot change the fact that your friend is dating someone you think is wrong for them. They're going to make their own choices. You can't force your introverted sister to suddenly become the life of the party at gatherings. You can't rewrite the coworker's personality who annoys you. And you certainly can't control random strangers on the internet saying silly things. It's out of your direct control and not a dire situation of harm. Then it certainly is a candidate for let them. So if it's a candidate for let them, let me give you some steps to apply it. Pause and use the mantra. The moment you feel the urge to change someone, or you feel anger or sadness rising because of their behavior, pause, breathe, and quietly tell yourself, let them. Step 2, assess your emotions and needs. After saying let them, notice how you're feeling. Often you might feel a bit of relief, like a pressure valve released. If you still feel really agitated, that's data 2. You might ask yourself, why does this bother me so much? Sometimes letting them uncovers something about us. Step 3, decide on your response, if any. After accepting they're doing X and I can't change that, decide what you will do. Many times you'll find the answer is do nothing. Just move on, conserve your energy. Step 4, let them to empower yourself, not to avoid your own growth. And this is critical. Check in with yourself. Are you saying let them because it's genuinely isn't worth the fuss and you're at peace letting it go? Or are you saying it to avoid a scary but necessary conversation? There really is a quick litmus test for you to know when to use this and not to. If I let them do X, who bears the consequence? If the only consequence is you feeling a bit annoyed or missing out on something trivial, then applying let them might be fine. If the consequence is serious harm to you, them, or others, then that's not a let them scenario. And you know what? Sometimes it is okay to follow up later with an open conversation if needed. Let them can be your immediate reaction to avoid an explosion, but maybe later you come back and you calmly say, hey, earlier I decided not to bring it up, but I do want to talk about what happened. So just start small. Tomorrow, maybe intentionally allow someone to do something their way that you normally would criticize or control. It could be as small as letting your child dress themselves in a wild outfit without commenting, or letting your partner load the dishwasher. Absolutely wrong. And not going back and rearranging it. Notice how it feels. Did the world end? Did the sky fall because the bowls were on the top rack? No. Maybe you even get a chuckle. Maybe you don't, but maybe you do and realize that it wasn't a really big deal. You know, one place that I think that this theory would really work out for a lot of people, social media. The internet is a breeding ground for people to disagree and arguments. And the let them theory can save you a lot of stress online, because if someone posts something that you don't like, Just let them. If a stranger makes an unkind comment, just let them. You do not have to attend every argument that you're invited to. Save your energy for meaningful discussions, not fighting trolls or trying to correct every wrong take that happens on social media. Trust me, friends, your cortisol level will thank you. We've journeyed through the hype and the heart of the let them theory. And by now, you can see it's more than just a catchy viral trend. Yet it's also not some revolutionary new discovery. It's a reminder of a timeless lesson. You can't control others, but you can control how you respond. Two little words, let them, have become a viral shorthand for that lesson, resonating in our culture of stress and overdrive. In a world where we often feel pulled to manage everything and everyone, whether it's curating the perfect family outing, fixing our friends' problems, or getting validation for others, let them is a breath of fresh air. We also saw that this theory resonates psychologically. It aligns with acceptance-based therapies and age-old wisdom about accepting what we cannot change. The experts we heard from largely gave a thumbs up to the core idea of letting go of over control, while wisely warning us not to take it to extremes and to make sure we use it with mindfulness. Healthy relationships do sometimes require, hey, we need to talk, not just a silent acceptance. And personal growth often requires facing uncomfortable feelings, not just pushing them aside. So think of let them as one tool in your toolbox. It's fantastic for many day-to-day frustrations and for recognizing the limits of your control. But it's not the answer to every situation. No single slogan ever is. What I find beautiful is that so many people felt seen by this concept. Those moments are liberating and sometimes painful because letting go often involves grief for what you wished would be. Let Them has packaged this insight in a really friendly way, and it is spread and continues to spread like wildfire. It's also a bit humorous when you think about it. We humans really need to be reminded to mind our own business for our own good. I'm hoping the next time I catch myself rearranging the dishwasher that I can say, okay, let him do it his way, and then go find something better to do. And as we wrap this up, I want you to consider something. What's one thing you're going to let go of controlling today? It could be tiny or big, and how might that bring you a slice of peace? Conversely, is there something you've been avoiding that you realize letting them isn't truly helping, and maybe you need to address it head on? There's no shame in admitting that too. The goal is not to use this idea to hide from life, but to stop fighting life's less important battles so you can win the more important ones. In the end, let them isn't about them at all. It's about you. It's about setting yourself free from the exhausting cycle of trying to manage everyone and everything around you. It's about trusting that you'll be okay, even if others make choices you don't agree with. It's about respecting others enough to let them be responsible for themselves. When you do that, you might find your relationships actually get healthier because you've stopped trying to edit other people's lives, and instead you're living your own with more calm and more authenticity. So the next time you find yourself clenching up over someone's actions, remember these two words, let them. Smile, maybe even chuckle at how such a simple phrase can diffuse your internal drama. But also remember not to walk away from the things that need conversation. And then carry on with your life, which is the only thing you can truly control and the main thing you're meant to thrive in. Thank you for spending time with me here on Speaking of This. I hope that this deep conversation into the viral let them theory has given you food for thought, a couple of laughs maybe, and some practical insight. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow me, leave a review. It's free. Let me know your take on the let them craze. Have you tried it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Somewhere in between. I'd love to hear your stories. And remember to check out the show notes for all the references and resources that I mentioned. Until next time, take care of your mind, body, and soul. And as always, keep speaking your truth and maybe letting others do the same. See you in the next episode.